I want to reissue this correction. Yesterday, we watched a clip of the law professor Khiara Bridges, who was testifying at the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing about abortion rights. And Josh Hawley went into essentially, was mad at her for saying people with a uterus, as opposed to saying women, I guess, and thought that he was that. And she said, when you pretend that there aren't trans men who are, their gender is man, but they have the capacity to get pregnant. When you pretend that that doesn't exist, you are doing harm to them. You are adding to transphobia. You are also adding to the sense that they are pariahs that lead to such a high rate of suicide amongst folks like that.
And not in service of truth, but in service of like an Adam and Eve style fundamentalism.
It is both in service of his theocratic religious fundamentalist notions about, that his religion should impose their sense of what is right or wrong on everyone else. And it's also, to be fair, because this guy's an educated guy, it's also, to be fair, an incredible cynicism and disdain for other human beings who are standing in the way of his political career, having a future, maybe becoming president. So it's both those things. And maybe they're not mutually exclusive. I don't know. But, and yesterday, just to issue a correction, I said, this guy's already, his staff is already getting him booked on Tucker Carlson as we, watch this clip. And I was wrong. Apparently, Sean Hannity's producers got to him first, and there's a certain amount of professional courtesy that's if the Hannity's producers reach him first, then Tucker's got to probably wait. Probably not tonight, probably tomorrow night. It's probably going to have to be usually they do a 36-hour, 48-hour turnaround, but we'll see.
Yeah, Hannity's got to be a little more proactive in his branding now, because he was the standard Republican establishment guy. Tucker's numbers better than him, so I got to snag a guess. I got to snag Hawley after he went after that black professor.
He's covering his bases because he may have some problems with the whole Trump thing if Trump doesn't happen. But
whoops.
So allow me to be corrected, and here is Josh Hawley on Hannity last night.
Senator, I guess you're transphobic, and you're, according to this professor, opening up trans people to violence by not recognizing them. At no time during that exchange did I see you didn't acknowledge that there are people that are transgender.
Here is the modern Democrat Party today, Sean. It is that you have to say that men can get pregnant, and if you don't say it, then you are a bigot and you are responsible for violence. I mean, that is the party line. Let's not forget who invited this witness. She was there as a Democrat witness. You didn't see a single Democrat disagree with that. In fact, they're all over social media applauding her and saying, oh, that's exactly right. It's not exactly right. It's exactly crazy.
All right, continue. Let's see. That's all that we have. But there's Josh Hawley on there, making hay out of this. And, this is like the sweet spot for Fox News. Black woman standing up for the notion that trans people exist. This is, short of having her come on to argue against whatever war it is that they're cheerleading, this is it. This is like ratings gold, and I guess it was Hannity's turn.
Apparently,
today during a Senate judicial.
Apparently, Hawley was tweeting about this all yesterday too, right? Like, you've got to milk everything that you can out of this.
What's interesting is he mentions that people were saying that she's exactly right, which seems to me to suggest a little bit of anxiety about how it's landing, because she is exactly right. He's wrong. That's simply like the judgment on that.
But that's part of what it is too. We mentioned this yesterday about how they don't really want to be in a corner defining what a woman is. They don't want to be caught on tape with that kind of definition. So they're just accusing liberals, professors, etc., of having a muddled message, not being able to answer a question. They don't want to be caught espousing the bigotry. They just want to be accusatory of like liberal hypocrisy or them being unable to find the definition of a woman.
I think there's also something else going on here, that the Democratic liberal, if you want to say, sometimes leftist perspective on when the right is waging a culture war. And I know there are some people saying like, well, no, the left issued the first shots in this culture war by accepting that transgender people are transgender and allowing them to use bathrooms or something like that. And I suppose, you could argue that like the left started the culture war when they, started to espouse abolition of slavery. I mean, on some level, that status quo was slavery, and the culture war, according to them, was started when you said no slavery. And then the culture war was like, then you're saying like Voting Rights Act and Civil Rights Act. Then you're saying Title IX. These are all opening salvos in the culture war. And okay. But after securing some measure of rights, the left, the center left, the Democrats, liberals, however you want to categorize this, have backed off these fights with the idea that maybe that like there's no point in engaging in these. And this is a fundamental misunderstanding. It was exactly what the theory, like if we ignore Rush Limbaugh, maybe he goes away. And it's a misunderstanding of what's going on here. Josh Hawley, this is just giving an opportunity for Josh Hawley to get on TV. But if it wasn't Josh Hawley, it would be some other dude who got on there and if there was no law professor that day, they would be talking about something else. They would be talking about a transgender kid in Iowa or whatever it is. They're just talking to their base. And what I think someone like Josh Hawley is a little bit nervous about is that if he's ever to run for president, let's say, he can't just talk to his base. And when someone like this law professor gets there and provides a very rational, coherent answer to what he's saying, it begins to pull the fight, which they don't even want the fight. They just want to be able to stir up their people. But it begins to pull it into the sort of the area of like just normal people. Normal people who are like, okay, there's some of those normal people like, I don't know anybody who's transgender. I think it's a little bit weird, but whatever. It doesn't impact me. Like, why are they so adamant that this is a problem? I've never had a problem with a transgender person. My life is not, I mean, this is what happened with marriage equality. This is hard for people, I think, who are frankly younger than I to remember that there was a time not that long ago, 15, 20 years ago, with the idea where they were saying you cannot have a man marry a man or a woman marry a woman because it's going to impact my marriage. It's going to devalue my marriage. It's going to make my marriage meaningless. And that worked in conservative circles. But as soon as it started sort of like pouring out into like normal people, and they're like, wait a second, how does this work? If Bob and Steve, who live 4 states over from me, get married, it's going to, what? Mess with my marriage? What? So when Massachusetts declared marriage equality the law of the land in Massachusetts, and people in Michigan were just like, my life hasn't changed at all. Like, my marriage is still as good or as sucky as it was like the day before those people got married. It is what it is. And on some level, like the engagement in this culture war brings it onto territory that is far less favorable than in the, fever swamps of Fox.
The zero-sum game
right.
of rights, where if some people have rights, you have less rights. Like, that is not it's not the halls of Congress or whatever, or if the mainstream media is talking about it, or if Democrats are engaging in it, it's less fertile ground than if they're talking about it on Fox or on conservative talk radio.
Exactly. And then they start losing. They're just used to. I mean, this is the same thing. Why Crowder and Rubin and Tim Pool, like, why they are afraid of engaging with people.
Don't forget Prager,
all of them. They're afraid of engaging because they're used to just winning the argument because they're talking to people who agree with them.
They're victory laps. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're just like, and there's plenty of other reasons you would say a pregnant person, like in terms of non-binary, that may be more common than this example. But just a story, I wonder how Hawley would react to this. This is from Cosmopolitan a few years ago. Man shocked to discover he has a fully functioning womb. A man was shocked to discover he has a working womb identified by his doctors during a recent medical examination. A 37-year-old British man known as Rob said he was worried blood in his urine was a possible sign of bladder cancer and went to his doctor seeking medical help. According to a report in the National Post, it was then that his doctor surprised him with the news that he has fully functioning female reproductive organs. I think that guy, if he got pregnant, should be allowed to have an abortion. Should have the right to have an abortion. Simple.
Right. I mean, you know, like, and I get for some folks, like, it's a clumsy way to say it, or it's a clumsy this and that. Yeah, okay.
But like, if you were working with, if you were like, I think like it might be deployed too maybe too often in public. But like, if you're working with pregnant people, you should have that awareness of like, if you just call everyone that you interact with women, you're going to offend somebody.
Right. It's just being not rude.
Simple.
I mean, I don't like. I guess, you know, I mean, and I say this as someone who mispronounces people's names, cannot pronounce people's names, says Louisville wrong. I say Louisville or something like this, or Missouri.
You got Blofeld right yesterday.
Yeah, I got Blofeld right. Occasionally, it's completely hit or miss. But the bottom line is, just don't be a dick. Just don't be an asshole. Like, it's so easy
and
to just not actively be an asshole.
Most people don't want to be an asshole. Let's say they were like helping treat somebody who's pregnant who was non-binary, and they call them a woman. They would want to know why I was led by a effing senator to insist on something like that, rather than having an understanding of where that person's actually coming from.
Yeah, and honestly, most people in their private lives are gonna, if they have worked with a trans person, I'm not saying like in every situation, they might be rude behind their back, but like if push comes to shove, they're not going to be actively misgendering them to their face on a daily basis.
Not unless they're Republicans.
Right. But the Republicans want to feel morally justified in their position of being an asshole. And like, that's what these guys provide for them, is some, you know, artificial moral veneer, which is not morality, so that they can feel good about being the same way that they've always been and not changing or evolving.
And I will say that I think what Sam, you said is very accurate in the sense of like, sure, could it be clumsy to some people? Absolutely. But I think like seeing how that has become a clumsy phrasing can be equated to being like, oh, it's the tip of the spear against the war on women. And that's not just being espoused by Hawley or Cornyn, whoever at these hearings. That's Pamela Paul in the New York Times opinion section, influencing famous people like Bette Midler, being like, oh, who Bette Midler, by the way, gay icon, saying, oh, there is a war on women. They're calling pregnant people like that. I know it seems ancillary, but this is changing minds who are influential, or at least influencing people who should know better and who are clearly marks. And they are being marks, and they are marks at the disposal of people who are ostensibly much less insidious than these guys.
Mm-hmm.
It's also sort of like, you know, an extension of, I can't believe I have to say the Washington football team.
That's all it is, yeah. Or press one for English.
So clumsy.
Every soccer team does that.
By the way, they're the Commanders now, and like people are going to get used to it within a year. Same thing with Cleveland Guardians.
The Washington Cops.
Blackhawks are next. Change that racist ass logo.
But it's
please.
people that like find themselves in a neighborhood in Queens and see like different language on the signs and think it's America is over as we know it.
Yeah.
Wayne Kerr. I think normal people are on board with everything except conflating words with violence. Normal people don't want to be accused of violence because they say woman instead of person who can get pregnant. Hawley is disingenuous, but normal people can make that mistake honestly. I agree with that. And maybe if I was to say there was any flaw in her response, it was that she was aware of why he was doing it, but not everybody is aware of why he's doing it.
Yeah, but I mean, the way he doubles down, I feel like more normal people, like if you double down like Hawley did there, then you are doing what she's describing.
Exactly. But I do think it's helpful to both cut people slack when they do it, and your sense is their intention is it's an honest mistake.
Yes.
Right.
Because I think it's very easy to make that mistake, particularly, if you're not if you don't know people who are transgender, if you're older and haven't been used to for older people, I like to think I'm on the cusp of being an older person, not quite there, but it is confusing.
I mean, it's ingrained in our language. I know somebody who recently came out as they, them, started putting it on forums, and even they have trouble discussing people they're sort of dating. They have to correct themselves, right? In some instances, but that comes from a much different place than what Hawley comes from.
Exactly, and sometimes it's helpful for you if you are engaging with someone like that, particularly doing it for other people's benefit to show the engagement, to make it clear what their intent is, so that they can't make it about you're just being picky about language. No, your language is revealing your intent.
It's part of a spearhead for a policy attack on these people.